This way, it'll be online for people.
Sit over there, Brendan.
Our startling, stunning conversation, which I'm sure.
Don't ask me, I can't remember. I can't remember anything anymore. But I know
Hello. Hello. We're also, hello. I am going to keep my phone on. I'm the only pastor on campus this week. Pastor Wyatt is at a bishop's conference, and Pastor Tim is on vacation, and we do have someone who has a surgery starting at 11. So I just want to keep my phone on to get any kind of updates or reports. Does the world really need two of me? Like I feel like one of me is probably more than enough. Oh my gosh. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Well, welcome to any of you who are online. Welcome to you all, the proud, the faithful, here to close out the 10 Commandments. It'll be kind of a wrap-up class. I want to give some time and space to be able to talk through any of the commandments that maybe still there's some stumbling blocks or still some questions or some thoughts. Talk a little bit about what we talked about this weekend, preaching-wise, of all the commandments to love and to love one another. And then also, because we're in a small group, if you want to talk about some of the Israeli and Palestinian things that are happening, which is a great conversation about loving one another, again, in a small group discussion, I feel that it's good to be able to have conversations, to hear one another, and so we can open it up to that as well. So that's kind of my plan for today. Does that sound okay? Excellent. I always love I ask that question. Right, and if someone said no, I'd be like, okay, what plan do you have then? Because that's where I was going to go. So let's begin with a word of prayer. Lord God, we dedicate this time to you, to knowing you deeper, to growing closer to your word and your wisdom and your love. Oh, that is my phone. Oh, that's Minneapolis. We're going to say that's a spam call. But Lord, for spam and for everyone else, we do lift up to you those who are in need right now and those who are facing surgery and those who cannot be with us. In your name we pray. Amen. That's not the number that I need, so I'm good. Okay, so let's start. 10 Commandments in general. You know, we've been doing this for about 12 weeks, I think. It's been the total of the series. And so we reviewed this weekend what they all are. As you think about these top 10, is there any unresolved conversation or thoughts, or anything that has kind of come back to you, anything that has stuck with you? This is also a great time to give and receive feedback as to what has hit you. So remember, the first 3 are about God, no other gods, God's name in vain, and remember the Sabbath day. So anything in particular about those that are still kind of left hanging?
I like the expansion
Mm-hmm.
of Sabbath.
The expansion of Sabbath, yeah.
I mean,
Of understanding it?
not just be Sunday. Or
Yeah.
one particular time. Especially for you.
Yeah. You know, I started a Sabbath practice during my day. That like I work on something. So I'm working on the Vision newsletter, right? So all the stuff I have to do for that. And now that the weather has changed, I go out and I take a walk on a prayer walk that goes right around here. And then I come back in, and now I begin my next thing. And so trying to find moments of Sabbath, moments of recentering, moments of being recreated in that time. And so figuring out what my Sabbath rhythm is going to be. So yeah, good. There's also on PBS, there's a great documentary. It's a 2-hour documentary called Sabbath. I just watched it recently with a friend, and it goes into also different religious traditions of Sabbath. And it's just really, and you can watch it for free online as well. And so Sabbath is the name of it. Really fascinating. Goes into the history, but also goes into the Islamic idea of Sabbath, the Jewish Sabbath, Christian Sabbath, interviewing different churches, different things. So it's really, really good. All right, so after the 3 about God, we then go to family. Remember, mom and dad, honor their father and mother. Thoughts on that one?
You expanded that as well.
Mm. Yeah. That understanding of honoring and taking seriously their concerns, but honoring doesn't mean, being able to have to be in unhealthy relationships, right? You can have space and care for people, and what that looks like and in our families. And yeah, and that understanding of you had to honor mom and dad because you wanted your kids to honor you, right? That there was that cyclical model of what that is. Then we get into the do not kill, right? Do not murder.
To me, it was really interesting because when you go back to the Hebrew meaning
Yeah.
of the word kill, it really meant
Murder.
I think that's amazing.
Right? It is hard to dwell in these 10 commandments that were given to the Israelites, right? Given to the Jewish people, who we call the Jewish people today, and to think about the things that are happening in that space and in that geography, and where do these commandments, and so when I was over there, they talked about, we have the same thing in our Christian understanding, the different ways of being Jewish. There is the religious observance of Jewish, right? And so you often will see people dressed in certain ways with that. But there's also the nationality, right? My grandmother her last name was Frosch, and her parents were Jewish. But she was not Jewish of faith, she was Jewish by blood. And so, and then she married a Morris, who's not Jewish. And so we don't have that line anymore, but so then there's Jewish by blood, but not by faith. And then over there, they actually also call a political Judaism. And so we don't know that everyone who is in charge, everyone who is making the decisions that are being made, are of the faith when it comes to Judaism. It could be Jewish by blood, that they are ethnically Jewish, nationality, and it could be political as well, which understanding that gives me a little bit of room to have with these 10 commandments and when I see what's happening over there as well. So yeah, so murder, again, capital punishment, I think that's something that we as Christians have to think about. And where do we stand on that? What does that look like? Do we ever have the authority to take life, and what that is? So that's a complex one. After that is adultery, being faithful in relationships, right, and what that looks like. Any thoughts or questions about that one?
It just reminded me, I have a former employee who was actually, was an incest situation with her father. What do you do in a case like that? How do you honor a father that did something like that?
Right, the honoring of family when there's broken relationships, right? Incest, abuse, abandonment, right? All of those, and what does that mean to honor? And that's why I like that definition of what the word means, to take seriously or give weight to, because it also doesn't say how much weight, right? Like whenever you receive criticism or praise, you always consider the source, and that is how much weight you give it. And so if someone hasn't been very faithful to you in their relationship to you by blood or by word, then maybe the weight that you give to them isn't as heavy as someone who you would give more weight to because of the relationship. And so in a case of incest, to honor them may just be to acknowledge they exist. And that may be just about as much weight as you want to give that honoring. Yeah, Bobby?
Honoring is different than murder.
Yes, honoring is different than loving.
There's respect the fact that in the case of parents,
Hmm.
that they gave you love.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you still have a situation
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and so I love that, the difference of honoring and loving, right? And that there's difference there. And again, you can honor what they've done or the sacrifice that they've made, but also holding boundaries is honoring the relationship, right? Because boundaries, and that's what the Ten Commandments are, is really saying, in order for us to be in relationship, to honor one another, these are the boundaries I'm putting into place. And how do we live with those boundaries? Like, as my parents gave us boundaries, I had a curfew, right? And it was kind of, you're going to be in this house, here are the boundaries, right? Here's the expectations. This is what it means to be in a relationship. And my dad he told me many years later, he's like, I swear, you would sit at the top of that driveway until like 11:59, and then you would swing in. He's like, you were always like, right when I was like about ready to get mad because you were, I'd see the headlights coming in. And I was like, no, I'm just really good at timing.
You know, one thing that was kind of neat years ago, I don't know if it was Channel 9 or whatever, one of the channels, local channels used to say, it's 10 o'clock, you know where your children are.
Yeah.
It was such a wonderful feeling knowing that they were home and in bed.
Yeah. It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? There's on the Tickety Talk, all the different generations chime in with different things, and the generation, my generation, has been saying, you know, we're the generation where our parents had to be reminded they had children, right? That we grew up with the, it's 10 o'clock, do you know where your children are, kind of thing. Because it was, but it was also, was also kind of one of those things of kids could be outside for hours upon hours because it was a different world. And so wondering about that.
And you didn't worry about it. Now,
Yeah, not in the same way at all.
my daughter's neighbor across the street just got robbed.
Mm.
Yeah. So, she was not home, but Leslie was.
Yeah.
I could just as soon have gone to my daughter's house when she was there.
Yeah, we do live in a different world. I mean, partly with the access. I don't know that some of these things weren't happening before, we just didn't know about them. You know, I mean, now with the access of 24 hours and everything is instant, we have much more awareness of what's happening, for better, for worse.
And there's an emphasis on the evidence. That's what makes the most
Yeah,
respect.
because that's what we'll watch, right? Like it's a reciprocal relationship.
That, I mean, it sells. That was
Mm-hmm.
used to be in newspapers and things. There's crime and violence and sex.
Right.
So,
And remembering, like, we have power in that reciprocal relationship of what we consume and what we don't consume. And so when everything started going on a couple weeks ago with the war, and I was on the news 24/7, I was looking at all different news sources, I was going down all kinds of rabbit holes, and then I wasn't sleeping at night, and I was just in a constant state of anxiety. After that Sunday, I went on a 48-hour fast of news and technology. I just shut it all down, and I didn't look at anything, and I didn't, because I needed to control what I was consuming, right? And they can't get to me if I don't consume it. And so it's a reciprocal relationship. Reciprocal relationships is also all about adultery, right? Again, it's being faithful. And faithful in our friendships. You know, again, we think about adultery only in a marriage relationship, but it's also being faithful in our friendships. It's being faithful, again, I think I had said the first commandment's being faithful to God, the fourth commandment's being faithful to family, and then the sixth commandment is being faithful in relationships and what that looks like. And sometimes I was at the Chamber of Commerce thing talking to people who do hospice. And I was talking about sometimes the most faithful thing you can do as a spouse is ask for help. And ask for your spouse to go into a different place than you. And that is faithful. Because you are loving that person. You are caring for that person. You're giving them the best that you can do. And what that looks like. And so faithful doesn't necessarily mean staying in a relationship in the same way when people can't be in that space, right? If someone turns into an abusive alcoholic, right, being faithful may mean having to step aside for a while. And it doesn't mean you don't love them, and it doesn't mean that you are not still in fidelity with them. But to be faithful means also creating those boundaries and spaces as well. So number 8 is do not steal. Seems pretty easy, and yet really I think happens often, all the time. And whether we even steal people's time, steal people's identity. Have any of you guys had identity theft? Has that happened to anyone here? Oh, right? It's one of the scariest things. But think about the people, if you've gotten the emails from Pastor Tim asking, do you have a second? I need gift cards. I need. So I was almost the victim of catfish. You know what catfishing is? You guys are too old. So in the online dating world, right, someone creates a fake profile. And so they romance you and the whole entire deal. And in some severe cases, you start to give them money and the whole thing. So I was online dating. I was in Minnesota. A guy messaged me. I thought it was great. Now, I'm kind of savvy at these things. And this feels a little too good to be true. So I reversed imaged the picture so I could see search if they came up. Didn't come up on anything. Long story short, this guy all of a sudden had a meeting in Dubai, so we couldn't meet. And I'm like, okay, a little fishy, but okay, whatever. So then he keeps texting me, but there were just some weird things. I was like, I don't think this is real. And then it happened. Boom. I broke my phone, and I need you to get me an iTunes gift card to be able to fix my phone. And I was like, yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen. And so then I started to play a little bit and say, well, hey, you know what? Like you're this rich engineer. I work for a church. Why don't you transfer $100 to me? I will then go get the iTunes gift card for you, and then I'll send it back, right? I thought, let's just see if I can. Yeah, he didn't fall for that. But I was like, look, the gig is up. Like, I know you know the whole deal, and he was someone who was in an African country. And he worked for a company, and that this is what they did. And so they stole people's time, stole their hearts. They tried to do an isolation, like take your profile down because you're the only person for me. I love you. Like they really and then they start to steal your money. Yeah, Brian.
That's a big concern now with artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, AI. I didn't know much about AI, and Josh, who's in school, and so he and I were talking about it, and they were talking about people writing papers through AI. I said, what do you mean? And so we pulled up the ChatGPT site, and so I said, you type in everything out. I said, write a 3-minute sermon using examples from Jesus' life on generosity. And I said, make it humorous and have sensitivity to it. By golly, if it didn't write, like, bam, the most beautiful. And then I was like, oh, this is scary. And then I was like, write a sermon for a teenage suicide. And then, bam, was phenomenal. And then I had one more. I forget what my third example was, but by the time the third example, it had learned. Because I didn't even say Jesus, and it was all ready. So it learns. So with the AI, you have to be even more, and especially folks as we come up to a political season. The commercials you're going to see, to the point of what you think people are saying, you got to do your research. You got to diversify your news sources. So go all across the table and always look for where is this source? Where is this coming from? Because, yeah, with the AI, it's going to get even worse. So that's about stealing. It's going to be a hard one. After stealing comes bearing false witness.
Back to the AI thing, this was a gift from our father.
Artificial intelligence? Oh, yeah.
Obviously, the intelligence of the people gave us that and it came from God, so, we have to deal with it.
And there's beautiful things. They're saying, like, your grandkids will never not have had AI in their life, right? Your grandkids know, hey, Alexa, right? They're used to talking to their appliances and getting responses, getting their needs met, right? Now, there is some beautiful things like that because how it does connect people, how people are able to get to resources, what that is. So there's gift, but just like anything, humanity has an ability to corrupt it with our sinful selves and with our sinful nature. That's everything in our world. It comes as a gift from God, and then we can take it and corrupt it. So yeah, thanks for that wonderful thought.
Can it come from Satan instead of God?
Oh, it's a great question. We would go back to the question of who created Satan. I mean, if God is the origin and God is the source, whether you want to go with I'm going to call it mythology because it's a story and creation of the serpent. If that's the personification of evil, where did the serpent come from? Could it exist without God? Not how we understand it.
If God gave free will, that was the choice. So,
Correct. But that still, that original space is, we all have that ability. And so is there, I mean, this is a whole nother class, is there a corporate being known as the devil? I asked this question at the women's retreat and everyone kind of went, what? Yeah. And if there is a corporate being known as the devil, and the devil said, Father, forgive me. I no longer want to be this. Would evil no longer exist?
God knows his heart, so you can say it, but you don't need to.
But what if he does?
Because he's supposed to be.
Yeah, and then what happens? Right? I mean, it's an interesting thing to kind of play with. Have any of you guys ever watched the show Lucifer? It's on Netflix now. Did you watch it all the way to the end? It's a fascinating.
I just, there were so many aspects of that. It was one of those programs you think, should I be watching this show?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the premise is Lucifer is the devil, and Lucifer is tired of torturing people in hell. Just tired of it. So instead, he owns a club, and I think it's LA. And so throughout this, Gabriel, the angel Gabriel comes. Lucifer brings one of the demons with him, and then a woman. So for several seasons becomes a detective. This whole entire deal. But there's also this battle with the Father, and the devil and the Father, and kind of this Lucifer being, I don't want to be that way anymore. This is not who I am. This is not, and I don't want to be a spoiler because the twist at the end, I was like, oh, that's fascinating. But how forgiveness plays into all of this. It's just, yeah, it was just.
It was really an interesting series. It's quite long.
It is. It's like, I don't know, 5 or 6 seasons.
4 or 5
Yeah.
seasons.
Yeah, so great binge worthy. But really fascinating.
You're watching some of the things that, because they said, I think it said that if you, I don't know, read or watch or whatever these things, it can caption you or hypnotize.
Yeah, so there's a question, right, of how much do we expose ourselves to things, and in that, how much can we then be changed through them, and that can go for the Word of God, right? As much as it can go for anything of a secular nature or of a demonic nature, right? So I played Dungeons and Dragons as a kid, all the time. We would play 8, 10, 12 hours throughout. I listened to Ozzy Osbourne as a kid,
Now it's Wednesday.
right? I mean, yeah,
I watch it on my brain.
yeah, right? So all those things that people would say would lead you to the devil. Had a Ouija board as a kid. I know mediums and spirits. So I have gone through all of those things, lived through all of those things, but have stayed very centered in Christ and stayed very centered in that. So I think there's part of our own mental health that's in there. That when we expose ourselves to different things. So I think you know yourself. Like if you start to go down a path, like I was reading a lot of romance novels because they were just easy, right? Just so, and then I started to look at every man and think, where's my happy ending, right? Like I started to get really kind of jaded. I'm like, where's my man who's gonna conquer the world for me kind of deal? I was like, oh, I think I need to stop reading these for a while, right? Because it was really distorting my understanding and my thoughts because I was so immersed in it, right? So I think when we begin to kind of start to question that kind of stuff and say, maybe I need to step away from this a little bit.
So I guess also, if we don't know that there is the evil, we don't need God as much.
That's true.
You know, we kind of love and need God because of that.
Yeah, that dual nature of seeing, and it's hard not to see evil anymore, right? You just open up a newspaper, turn on the TV, drive down the road sometimes, right? And we see evil. And in knowing that, we also see where we need God's grace. Is it a gateway drug at times? You know, I know many people who've tried various drugs and have not become addicted. And I know other people who tried once and ended up dead. Right? And so sometimes it just depends on who we are and what that looks like. I know for me, God has always called me into a place of both and. My friends in high school were all the druggies. They were all the ones who were the drinkers. My friends in college, we used to joke that I was the girl with morals because we would go out to the clubs. They would all meet men. I would go around and collect credit cards from all of the men. And that way, the next morning when they dropped them off at the dorm, they would get their credit card back. And so I wouldn't take their driver's license because they were driving, right? So they get arrested. But I would take their credit card. And I was like, when you return my friend, because we have not met you, I do not know you, we are just meeting now, and you're taking my friend home, then I get your credit card. So then I've got ID, right? And so I've always been with my friends who lived radically different lives than I have, but I've always been able to stay in my space. So I also think it depends on where we're called in our worlds of what that is. Now all of my friends are happily married with children to wonderful husbands, and we don't talk about all the credit cards I collected. Yeah, and I'm still the single girl that's like, all right, what are we doing? What's happening? So stealing, bearing false witness, right? That's another one. Gosh, when I think about our news and our media, the bearing of false witness, it is hard, folks, to find truth anymore. It really, really is. And that is why, like I've said, I watch CNN, I watch Fox, I watch BBC. I diversify. And then I kind of see what is trending on all of those and kind of where they're saying what and kind of think, okay, well, somewhere in the middle of that has to be truth. If I can go to kind of all of the polars and then kind of see what's in the middle. But it is really hard. There's so much false witness. Right? And people testifying, people saying what it is they think they're doing or needing. So I think that's a hard one in our world right now. And then we get to the covets. Being content with ourselves and who we are and who God has made us to be, and being content with what we have. Doesn't mean you shouldn't work towards getting or receiving or having, but coveting is wanting and sometimes acting in a non-healthy way to get it, right? And so, even people who face certain like anorexia and bulimia, right? There's a licentiousness, there's a deviousness that comes in that they covet, this perfect understanding, and then it takes over their bodies.
So that
It does, and the people that I've worked with, they almost disassociate, and that they're being taken over by this eating disorder, ED they call it.
Lifelong problem.
It generally is. That you are in recovery for that as a lifelong.
We had a friend that also went up in Hazelton.
Mm-hmm.
His child couldn't take it for very long.
Yeah. It's a hard battle. Hard battle. So those are kind of those top 10 of what God calls us into. And I think every day I probably, I'm able to do maybe 4 of the 10 really well. Every day, I think coveting I have some hard times with. I get really down on myself because I see, like Pastor Tim, here's a perfect example of why we're different and why I love him. So we're having problems getting Sunday school teachers, right? It's just a constant battle. And so I'm telling him about this. And I'm like, I'm going to shut it all down. I'm just shutting it down. We're not going to do it. I'm just the whole. And he said, I think for All Saints Day, I'm going to preach about my favorite Sunday school teacher. And just really share the impact she had on my life. And I was like, I hate you. I don't hate it. I love it and I covet it. Where I'm like, let's just burn it down. He has this way of centering, of then being inspiring. And I covet that. I want that. I want to have more of that in my life. So covenanting, I think, is probably one of the ones I hit almost every day. Yeah, Brian.
You were talking Sunday on, loving others as you love yourself.
Yeah.
Friends and you like that you don't love yourself.
Yeah.
I think there's all kinds of that going on in the world right now, and why there's so many problems. Because a lot of inner city kids, I don't think love themselves.
Yeah. And what do you think when someone doesn't love themselves? What do you think that can lead to? Where does that go in someone's world? Anger and hate. Depression. Yeah.
I think they also, if they're struggling with that, they try to draw people in to empathize with them.
Mm-hmm.
So they know they're having an issue, and you draw in,
Yeah.
get some recognition, get some acceptance.
That's what our mentorship thing here is.
Yeah. And so when you're in that space of hate or anger, right, you draw others in to that, to either receive some recognition or misery loves company, right? If I can get others to bond with that and what that looks like. And Elizabeth, you were saying,
The mentorship program here, we may not have a lot of children, but I
Yeah.
have kids with a couple of them.
yeah,
And they benefit greatly from the mentorship.
yeah, we now have 20 confirmation students, so 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I think for Resurrection, we will never be the church that has 50, 80 kids. We're not going to be that church. I actually don't want us to be that church. I want us to be the church where every single kid is known and loved. And so if we have 20 kids and they all have an extra adult through the mentorship program who knows them, who loves them, when they can't love themselves, can still affirm that, I think it's that's when we're beating back the evil, right? That's when we're beating back against the devil and all of his forces, is when we can do that. But yeah, I think when we don't love ourselves, then that's also where we strike out. We sometimes we do this exercise where we have 4 or 5 people come and we just say, okay, now make a circle with your hands. So they join together and as a circle. And then we'll grab someone else and we'll say, okay, now you get in the circle. And that's the only instructions we give. You get in the circle. What do you think that circle does when someone tries to get in? Yeah, there's a fight. They wrestle, right? They're body blocking them. They're doing the whole. Did we ever say don't let them in? The only instruction we give is you guys make a circle. Now you get in the circle. But our natural tendency is to cast out, to exclude, right? And I wonder if we would be rooted in God's love for us, if we already felt solid and grounded, if our natural tendency would be to open up, to be inclusive, to not fear.
I wonder if it's our culture. My nephew's wife just came back from Canada. Spent 2 weeks in a small town.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, could you speak up a little bit?
Yeah, no, I have relatives that just came back from niece and nephew for 2 weeks in Africa in a small town. And they don't have much. But
Yeah.
what they have, they share. And we said, you know, for such a simple life, these people are so happy.
Right.
Are we too competitive? You know, is that part of our culture that it's, I have to get something for me, and that excludes giving it to you?
In a land of abundance, we live with a scarcity mindset, right? So in America, in America we have abundance. I'm drinking my Starbucks coffee, right? We have abundance of choice. If I'm hungry, right, and if I've got the resources, there's a plethora of choice, right? So we live in abundance. But then we operate in this scarcity mindset of always protection, of always turning in, am I going to have enough? In places where there is not the abundance of resources, so like in Kenya or in a lot of Latin America, or in the impoverished hills and the hollers of Appalachia, America, right? When you have these smaller communities where they have to pull their stuff together in order to exist, they actually also operate in an abundance mentality, because I know you've got a little, you've got a little, you've got a little, I've got a little. Together we have a lot. And so there is this mindset, this American culture, and I would say a lot of cultures that maybe have more advanced, where there is abundance, but especially in America, we live with that, we face that. And I think when you look at the amount of violence, I'm not talking about gun control, I'm not talking about laws or whatever that looks like, right? But in the amount of violence in America, as opposed to some other countries that are still advanced, right, that are still in Europe, you see there's a difference here. Mental health, the way in which we handle mental health here is very different than in other places. You know, maternity leave in Slovakia is a year.
Norway too. 6 months for the wife and 6 months for the husband.
The government feels it's that important to have the parents with the children that they are willing to provide for that during that time, right? Here, that ain't the reality, right? So I do think in America, our system, now, in saying all of this, please do hear, I don't want to live anywhere else, especially as a woman, especially as a single woman. That this is where I want to live, and I do not want to live anywhere else. And we still have a lot of things we have to work on that our culture perpetuates and what that looks like. And I think loving the other is huge.
By chance, did you ever watch YouTube?
A little bit. I'm on the Tickety Talks more than the YouTubes, but
On YouTube, there's this girl from the Netherlands. Her program's called she's called Itchy Boots.
Itchy Boots.
Itchy Boots. I highly recommend all of you try to find her. She does this tour on a dirt bike by herself, starting from South Africa, going to the tippy top of the Arctic above Alaska.
Wow.
And she goes through all of these sort of third world countries by herself.
Yeah.
With these cameras and a drone.
Wow.
And she stops at all of these little remote huts of dirt.
Yeah.
And it's
Wow.
And it gives you a very good
Mhm.
worldview of what
Yeah.
God really does.
Itchy Boots. Okay, we'll look for it on YouTube.
Yeah,
Itchy
she's
Boots.
a lovely girl.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I think if you aren't able to travel, if you haven't had the opportunity to travel into some different communities, you don't always understand the breadth of what God is doing in these communities, and whether you are calling God by Jesus or calling God by divine. God is God. I believe there is one God, there's one true God. I believe God revealed God's self through Jesus Christ. But I also believe I am human and can't understand the full capacity of who God is. And so I honor God and however God works in others. I will name that as Jesus. But I also am humble enough to know that I am human. And I don't know the mind of God, and I don't know how God exists. But when you're able to kind of open yourself up to the Spirit and see what God is doing in other places, that there is this humbleness, this beautiful understanding of who God is and what God is doing. And this immense amount of love. Like, again, I just love with accountability, right? I do think, I was talking to someone and they were talking just, well, how come can't we just love people? And we were talking about different people of different genders and different sexes. So we're having, well, why can't you just love? And I thought that's what we're supposed to do. I said, well, we are. But if someone murders someone, we're not going to bring him up in front of the altar and bless that and say, keep on going. We love you. Right? If someone is self-harming, right, we feel they're hurting themselves, we're not going to say, oh, that's okay. Keep doing that because we love you. Right? When we feel someone is hurting themselves or hurting someone else, the love for us is to say we need to help you figure that out and stop it. So if you come from a space theologically where gender and sexuality you feel is painful, you feel is hurting them, then you're going to come into a space of love saying, I love you, but you're hurting yourself. And because I love you, I want you to stop. So that's where that comes in the best possible light. That's where that comes in. So we have to love people, but also with accountability of not hurting themselves or hurting others. But there is an understanding of love and acceptance. Now, in saying that, when I think of sexuality and genders, I'm still exploring how I understand God to be, but I do not believe that it is sinful. And so I will say that again here where we can have conversations about that. I won't say it from a pulpit where it's a one-way conversation. So I don't want that to get confused. I'm not saying that, but I understand where people come from with that when it comes to love. I don't want to just drop that bomb and not give you an opportunity to respond. Oh, good. Excellent. Well, then if it's, that's even better. Other thoughts on pick Pastor Aaron's brain for another 20 minutes? Yes, Brian. No, go for it.
That's the way the world is now, I guess.
Yeah.
More going on. You know, and then what you know about religion and that, and if they go after Israel, I mean, pretty much done of the world.
You know, I've been trying to figure out. So I've been trying to do some more research on that concept, right? This the Zionist concept of that Israel needs to inhabit that land in order for the second coming to come. And I'm having a hard time getting past Jesus. Because as Christians, we believe Jesus is the revealed God. And in the life and death of Jesus, he showed no partiality to the Jews or to the Gentiles. And he never went about the world with destruction. So that I'm having a hard time. I'm trying to do some more research to understand where this Christian concept comes of this Israel must inhabit the land. And do they have to be the only ones?
I'm not talking so much about the land, I'm just talking about the Israelites. Look at what happened to the Israelites, like Babylon.
Yeah.
Babylonians, what happened to the Babylonians and everybody else that went after the Israelites?
Well, and I guess, Germany kind of has recovered, right? With 6 million, I would say they went after the Jews pretty hardcore.
I'm talking about the land. And
Yeah.
Same with Palestine. I mean, they're raised to hate the Jews, and they're not fighting about land. They just want to kill them.
Hamas is.
Well,
That's very different than Palestinians.
Palestinians are raised up in school. What are they taught?
So here's a couple of things you may not know. Did you know there are Lutheran schools in Palestine? And the Lutheran schools teach Christianity and about Islam. And so the Palestinians who come from those schools learn about peace and love through the Lutheran schools. We have 3 different schools over in Palestine that take the children of Palestine and educate them.
Yeah, there's always been that. What's the percentage then?
So, and also what you're looking at is in Gaza, you're not talking about the West Bank. And so all of the Palestinians who live in Bethlehem, who live in Nazareth, who live in Galilee, like all of those are Palestinian territories full of Muslims and Christians living side by side. And so Hamas takes root in the Gaza Strip, which is also filled with Christian Palestinians. So the Greek Orthodox Church, which is the 3rd oldest church in the land where the Christians were taking refuge, got bombed this week in Gaza. And so not all Palestinians are Muslims. If you are Christian and native in the Holy Land, you are Palestinian, because Israelis are not Christian. And so Hamas, yes, Hamas wants to take out the Jews. Yes, Hamas is a terrorist organization that wants to take out the Jews. Just like the jihadists are an Islamic organization that wants to take people out, right? Just like the KKK was part of the Christian organization who wanted to take people out, right? So every religious faction has extremes. And so that's where we have to be careful, right? Zionists are part of the Jewish faith that want to take out the Palestinians. Not every Israeli wants to take out the Palestinians. The Zionists want to take out the Palestinian. So it's a war between the Zionists and Hamas.
When you start a war, there's going to be innocent people killed regardless.
For sure.
I mean, there's no way of, you don't wear different colored uniforms, one big nice,
Yeah.
one big bad people.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And so the people who were at the kibbutz, the people who were at the concert, innocents, right? Innocents who were killed. The people who now are in Gaza, the children at the hospitals, right? The people who are taking shelter in churches, innocents being killed. And so you're right, there's innocence on all sides.
Plus you can't always believe what you hear either. These mosques, when they spread rumors and say, well, this
Yeah.
is what Israel did, they killed, they blew up
Yeah.
the hospital.
Well, and the Zionists, if you want to read a fascinating book, Blood Brothers by Father Shakur. So Father Shakur is a Melechite priest who is up in the Galilean region. And he was 8 or 9 years old in 1948 when the line of demarcation happened. And so Blood Brothers is his story. And his way of trying to find peace and coming into this understanding that they are my brother in blood through Abraham. And there's this beautiful, because he also then goes into the history of the Zionist movement, of the various ways that these understandings have come, and it'll tear your heart out as you read, and it also gives you hope. And I've met Father Shakur 2 different times now, and he still has his school. And like he started a school for Jewish children, Muslim children, and Christian children, because he believes it's through the children. When you put a group of kids together that don't know anything, they just play, right? They just play. And so he started this school to have all three, and it worked great until there comes a time where all the Israeli children are taken away to a camp every summer. And then what he noticed is when they would come back from that camp, they'd start to do fights with the Palestinian children and with the Christian children. Because it was during that camp, they would be taught their history, but in teaching that history, it also taught hate. And so eventually he had to no longer be able to have the Israeli children there because of what the systems were doing to the children. So I would recommend, because you're right, the news, again, it's really hard. Having traveled there 3 different times now, having spent time in Jewish settlements, having spent time in Palestinian territories, having gone to Yad Vashem, which is the Israeli museum in Jerusalem. I believe it's Jerusalem. That chronicles the story of the Israelis and the hate and the propaganda that has happened through them throughout time. And you walk into, at the end, you walk into the hall of, or the room of records, and you walk across this plank. So you're in this cylinder, and it's all of the names, all of the files of everyone who they've been able to track that was killed during the Holocaust. And so you're surrounded, right? So you understand the why. And so I would just encourage you. And if you want some other, Mitri Rehab is a Lutheran Palestinian pastor in Bethlehem. And so he has written some books as well as what it means to be a Palestinian Christian. Mitri, M-I-T-R-I. Rahab, R-A-H-A-B. Blood Brothers by Father Shakur. And that's a good audible as well if you like to listen to books. Blood Brothers is really good. Mitri Rehab, R-A-H-A-B. And I stayed at his, he's got a Lutheran center and church there. And the first year I went for school, we stayed there in Bethlehem for about a week. And walked the streets at night in this Palestinian territory and felt as safe could be. My friend and I, we got up really early, about 6 o'clock in the morning, and walked down to Nativity Church, which is where the manger is. And beside it, there is a Catholic church. And so we went in at 6 o'clock in the morning just to hear the sisters sing and felt completely safe. And so part of it is also thinking there's the West Bank, which is Jerusalem, that's Bethlehem, and it goes up into Galilee, into Nazareth, and that's all Palestinian territories as well. And then there's Gaza, which is the Palestinian territory that's under so much heat and has been for so long.
So what's the reason they always go after the Jewish people? You know, the Germans and stuff, and now what's going on against the Jewish people?
Yeah.
All the stuff around here where people are against Jewish people, and then just Turkey came out against them.
Well, and I don't know if you all grew up with the phrase, if you're going to go buy something or go get something, and they'd say, well, I'm going to Jew them down, right? And so part of that money, that miserly, part of it is the other, right? There's a group of people that want to exist unto themselves. And so we then feel threatened by that because they may get power. And we feel power is limited. And if they have power, then we don't have power. I find it interesting, the Amish, right? We all know the Amish, right? So there's a group of people who truly live a different life, I've never seen a hate the Amish sign, right? I've never seen a revolt against the Amish. And maybe because they live so separately and they don't try to enter into anything else. They're not going into politics.
They really remember the Sabbath day and keep it.
Oh, yeah.
All day long.
All day.
Buggies outside somebody's house all day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've always found it kind of interesting, but maybe it's because they don't interact. I think that the Jewish people, and some sort of assimilation have always, right, they're in public office, banks, right, that's always, we associate the Jews with money.
But that goes back so far,
Yeah,
the business with money.
Yeah.
They had no other way of making a living.
yeah,
Because the Christians, whatever the church was, back in the old days, it was Catholic,
yeah,
they wouldn't allow usury. So where did people borrow money? They borrowed it from the Jews.
yeah,
And that's how and the Jews were kicked out of so many different places.
yeah.
And that's the only way they could make a living.
Yeah, so the money is a history piece as well. Like that has always been. I think in Germany it was because it was the other, and again they had money, they had resources.
The other thing was
Yeah.
with the Germans, of course, after problems after World War I, when everything was taken away from the Germans,
Yeah,
and they were, reparations and all that kind of stuff, and they was practically starving to death by the time the 20s and 30s started.
right.
And they were looking for some scapegoat.
Yeah. So there is a whole history. And so I want to research more about the Zionist movement and kind of this understanding of reclaiming and why Christians, so this tattoo here I got from Wassim Razouk, who Wassim is Palestinian. His parents, his lineage is Coptic Christian. They came from Egypt, and he lives in Jerusalem. And his family has been tattooing Christian pilgrims for 500 years. And so this is the father, the father, the father, the father. And this stamp is based off of a stamp that was 300 years old. So I love that timelessness. I love that being in the holy city where Jesus was, being tattooed by someone. So I spent some time talking with him. And so he knew I was an American Christian, was there on a pilgrimage for school, and so he's Palestinian, has lived in Jerusalem his whole life, raising his family there. He was raised there, and at one point in time, he's tattooing me, and he stops, and he says, I do not understand why American Christians support Israel. I said, what do you mean? He said, they killed Jesus. They had their chance. The Jews did. They killed Jesus. They had their chance. They rejected Jesus. So why, as you as an American Christian, why would you support them? And I just said, Wassim, I said, you know what? I have not heard those words since I was a child. But when I was a kid growing up in the hills and hollers, people said that to me all the time. Well, the Jews killed Jesus. That's why we hate them. And for right, but for him in his world, that was still very present. Yeah, no, that's great. Oh, that's right for yes. But thank you for coming. Yeah, it is noon.
There is a very powerful statement here by your love overcomes hate.
Yeah, when love overcomes hate.
I'm getting away.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jealousy thing because of the lineage?
No, I have to be back.
With Abraham and Ishmael and Isaac.
Yeah.
I mean, I think.
Muslims, obviously, they are royal.
Yeah. I th-
They're not considered chosen. Well, maybe the Jews are the chosen ones.
chosen by their history. I mean, again, history is written by the winners, right? And so a lot of, so even remember before, after Moses, and they left and they were going to go in the promised land, right? And it was filled with the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites, and God said, according to the writers, to go and to conquer them, right? Kick them out of their land. Now, I've always had an issue with this, because if we believe God created all of humanity, then God created the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites,
We need to have lunch with Jesus.
right? And so one of the things we were taught in seminary was, again, this is historical. It's written in a historical space. And at that time, the belief was, if you won a war, it's because your God was stronger than their God. If you lost a war, it's because you displeased God and God allowed that army to conquer you. Now, all of this was written after the Babylonian exile, so after all this years and years and years of history. So they are looking back on their history and writing it. So they went into this land and conquered it. Therefore, their God must have said, you are to conquer these people because they won. So we read everything through the lens of Christ. And would Jesus ever actually say, go kill these people because I've got land for you? I can't find anywhere in the Gospels where that's the Jesus we know.
Jesus wasn't of this world.
Correct.
It was all about, violence.
Yeah.
Give away or just,
Yeah.
feed,
Feed. Yeah. Yeah. Come together as community, not tear the community apart. You are more than welcome to leave. It is officially over. Yes. No, you go right ahead. I'm turning off my mic, Luke.